Psychologist. She will be presenting today on strategies supporting children with big emotions and behaviors. She's over a decade of clinical experience working with children and families navigating big emotions and challenging behaviors. Her work focuses on helping families develop sustainable patterns that keep children out of crisis settings and engaged in everyday life. She believes that when adults are equipped with practical, developmentally informed tools, children are better able to build foundational skills, recover more quickly from stress, and experience fewer and less severe crises over time. So, Dr. McCabe, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you so much. Hey, y'all. I hope you're doing well. I'm glad you're here and joining me today. If you are here, I have an assumption that you either know somebody who has big emotions and big behaviors, have supported somebody with big emotions and big behaviors, and that means you're one of my people. So I have a hope, wish, and a dream in this world to get more skills into the hands of the community and share what I know to make life a little bit easier for the folks out there. So I'll get more into that as we go along. I work at RDU Therapy. It's a practice I opened a few years ago, and I am also a parent. I have twins that are in middle school, so send me all the good luck and all the good vibes and all the patience. I tend to work with families whose kids have really big behaviors. So we'll get into what that means on the next slide. I also do work supporting educators, clinicians, and other folks in the community. I've partnered with some agencies in the community like the YMCA to get some trainings to them so they can support their kiddos. Yeah, I shared with you earlier that my goal is to get more skills into the hands of the kids in the community because I want them out of my office. My life's work is to get kids out of my office and living their lives. When we think about big emotions, we are thinking about the kiddos whose emotions get big so quickly that they don't know what to do when they hit a spot of having meltdowns, meaning their emotions are so big that they are no longer thinking clearly and acting clearly. And we know when kids hit that spot, they're more likely to have behaviors to try to ease their emotions. So, all of the things that you see on the screen right now, all of these behaviors are often tools to help kids bring their level of emotion back down. And they're ineffective tools because they often make their problems worse. So, if you see any of these things in the clients that you work with or in your family members, they could be not a desired behavior, not something that they're doing intentionally, and yet they're doing it out of emotion being big. Any questions about that? I like to go along and ask questions as we go, if that's okay. Okay. One thing I do want to say is that children will have some of these behaviors as part of typical development. There will be lying that is part of typical development. There's healthy boundary pushing and experimenting as kids grow up. When I think about these big behaviors, I'm thinking about how often they're happening, how significant they are, how dangerous they are, and if they're happening more than what we would expect for their typical development. Everything on this list is what I would see in my office on a typical day. To understand kids with big emotions and then big behaviors, I want to talk to you a little bit about the research and some of the newer research that you all might not have read about if you haven't been in a class in the last couple of years. As of 2026, 1 in 3 kids hits their parents, according to some research coming out of Europe, and 40% of those kids will go on to hit their parents again and again. And that is something that I feel like we do not talk about a lot in our society, and it certainly doesn't come up often when I meet other moms for coffee, and yet it does happen. As of right now, suicide is the fourth leading cause of death in North Carolina for children 10 to 18 years old, and that's pretty darn scary to me. And we also know that non-suicidal self-injury increases over time, meaning there has been a 3.5% increase every year for the last 25 years. So we know this is getting worse, it's not getting better, or we're getting better at capturing it. Couldn't tell you which one because I'm not the one doing the research, and that is what research is showing. There's some other pieces that I wanted to jump back and tell you about too. I have some notes here that I'm going to flip to. Last year, there was research that came out that looked at the brains of kiddos who have ADHD. And they have found that there is if you follow my social media, you may have seen this. And if not, it'll be on there and there'll be a link to my social media again later on. They have looked at MRIs of kiddos who have big emotions, who have ADHD. And they have found that out of all the kiddos who have ADHD that they included in their study, there is a third type of brain formation that is happening where structures in the brain appear differently. And I'm going to not share all the sciencey bits of that. I'll link the article in the resources that shows that that third type of brain structure, those kiddos have bigger emotions and have a more difficult time in regulating their emotions when they compare different rating scales that the kids and the parents filled out. And I think that's really interesting to help understand where some of this might be coming from, the bigger emotions. Also, if I'm a Raleigh native, so I follow WRAL News, and I think it's interesting that they also shared that in the last week they looked at teachers and new teachers, and they see that roughly 13%, teachers report that roughly 13% of their elementary school kids are engaging in violent behaviors in the schools. They are seeing 31% of kids having aggression towards peers, and 34% are showing bullying in elementary school. That's a pretty darn high number, in my opinion. Now, we follow that bullying number down to middle school, and teachers are reporting that 57% of kids are having bullying in middle school. That's bothersome to me for many reasons, for my work, but also because I have middle school kids, so I care about that. And so our children are growing up with that in their environment as well. There's some high school data as well. I'll just skip on that because I would like to keep on going. There's a lot to cover today and there's so little time. In my years of doing what I've been doing and since I've been in school, I've been trained in a few different modalities, and two of my favorite fall under cognitive behavioral therapy. When you think about most forms of talk therapy that happen right now, one big domain is cognitive behavioral therapy. That's a big umbrella. Underneath that is DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, which has a large emphasis on behaviors and the behaviors people have and how that impacts their emotions. And underneath that realm, there is another form of DBT called DBT for children. So dialectical behavioral therapy for children. Those are the two main approaches that I use when I work with families. So I would like to share a little bit about what I know from those orientations with you here to help you understand what I'll be talking about for the rest of our meeting today. The DBT is one of the theories that it is built on is the biosocial model. Bio meaning the person's biology, the way they are wired on the day they are born, and how much they experience an emotion and what causes them to experience an emotion. So when we have an emotion, it's a whole body response to something. Now, our whole body has a response, and it can be a response to a small prompter in the environment. Let's say you're driving down the road and you see a billboard and you keep on driving and it doesn't make its way into your brain. If that billboard makes you feel emotions to a higher level, you are more reactive. Let's say you see a billboard for animals in a shelter, right? You may be more reactive to that or less reactive to that. If you are more sensitive to emotion, you are able to detect that quicker and more than other folks. And then there is your return to baseline. How long does it take your emotions to come back down? I'm going to give you an analogy to help you remember this. This is one of my favorite analogies. Imagine you're a metal detector. If you're walking around and you're seeking out metal on the beach, how big does that nugget of gold have to be to make the metal detector beep? How loud does it beep? And how long does it take for it to stop beeping? That's your sensitivity, your reactivity, and your return to baseline. People who have big emotions tend to be more sensitive, more reactive, and have a slower return to baseline because that is the way they are wired. It is not a choice. There are events we can experience in life, like a trauma, that can make us more sensitive, reactive, and have a slower return to baseline. That's a problem If you have all three of those, because life is complicated, there are always more stressors. The more often we experience stressors, if we are wired that way, we can't come back down to calm. We stay up here instead of bringing our emotions back down to here, and that's tough. The second part of the biosocial theory is the social bit. We live in a world surrounded by other people. We exist with media. We have parents, we have roommates, we have, everybody else that exists in our world and the environment that we live in. If our environment is not supporting us in a way that we can learn to manage our emotions and be safe expressing our emotions, we might be more likely to pick up ineffective behaviors. Now, I want to give you another example of something. Oftentimes, when I teach this, people think like, "Oh, well, if I'm not intending to cause harm, or I'm not, I'm a great parent, and I'm not an invalidating environment. I'm not a tough environment for my kid." That could be true. Sometimes our environment does not match us and our needs, and not because anybody's trying to do anything poorly. So I'll give you an example that hits near and dear to my heart. My older brother really struggled in school, and school came easily to me. I was invalidating to my older brother because every time he looked around, he saw my little sister having an easier time in school. I didn't intend to invalidate him, and I am sure I did. And we've had conversations about it. That was tough for him to grow up with. So, our world can have an impact on if we decide it's safe to talk about our feelings and to ask for help. If we have a harder time with that, we don't ask for help with managing our emotions. We feel ashamed, and then we stop getting support, and we're more likely to sit with those emotions on our own. And we're more likely to go kaboom because it's a lot to hold. The last line on this slide talks about interaction. And I want to go on to the next slide to talk more about that. In DBTC, DBT for children, a lot of the work that I do is with parents. And so in that model, I give parents strategies to support their children. What we know is that I can't see everybody's screen, and I so want to ask an audience participation thing. So I'm going to ask the question. Y'all don't need to respond. Um, have you ever been around somebody who's had a really big emotion that comes on out of nowhere? It does not feel good. I see a couple hands up and nods. Thank you. It does not feel good, right? It activates our systems. When we're around other people and they have big emotions or big behaviors, we want to respond. It doesn't feel good. And often we respond in a way to shut it down quickly. So I'm going to give you an example. Kid comes home from school, has a tough day. They throw their backpack down. Maybe they knock something over. Parent yells, "What are you doing? Chill out," right? Parent has added to kid's tough situation, and parent has also escalated and had a response. One off, that doesn't matter. We can move along. And yet, if there's this mismatch between child and parent and what the child needs, we can accidentally drive up problem behaviors. So I know a lot of you may already know this. I'm not sure who all's in the room, so I'm going to do some teaching anyway. An emotion happens when there's been an event. So let's say I'm walking in the mall and I see Karen Gray and I want to wave at her. And I say, "Hey, Karen," and I wave, and Karen doesn't wave back. So the event is I wave, Karen doesn't wave back. I may have the thought, "Wow, she really doesn't want to talk to me." I may feel sad then and have an impulse to walk away, to leave the mall. And that would be my behavior, to leave. Now, if that happens differently at home and I am the kid, my sibling might steal my toy from me. And I have the thought, "Wow, what a jerk. I'm really angry now." And then I have the impulse to hit my sibling. So I do hit my sibling. The adult responds with anger, and then that is the next event for the child. So over time, how the parent and child, or how the environment and the person with big emotions interact, can either make it easier for children to learn skills or more difficult for people to learn skills. And there can be invalidation between those two. Any questions about that? I want to stop. I covered a lot in a very short amount of time.
And if you have a question, you're welcome to unmute or you can type it into the chat and I'll be happy to read it out loud as well.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to keep on going. This is a graphic that depicts what happens over the course of time. If we're living at the calm level and something happens, our emotions may go up. If our emotions get up high enough, we might have a problem behavior at the top, and then our emotions may come back down before we return to calm. For a person who is not sensitive, highly reactive, and slow return to baseline, we can go through this pretty quickly. That might look like something that happened earlier this week. I was making hard-boiled eggs, holding my eggs next to the stovetop. I went to put my eggs into the boiling water. I was planning on making 18. My kids love hard-boiled eggs, so it's an easy protein snack I love having in the house. Putting eggs in, and I'm not paying attention, and the carton tips. It tips over and it falls on the ground and it crashes, and I yell, "Damn it!" Sorry, excuse me, darn it! And so I escalated. I had a problem behavior, and I came back down pretty quickly. And I was able to look around and say, "Sorry about that." And I was back to calm. If we have a slow return to baseline, we might stay up there higher and have a difficult time coming down, and we might have more problem behaviors at the top. If you're a parent and you're in the environment with me and you've just heard me say my word, what is your urge to do? Most parents have an urge to correct in that moment, and then they add on, and then there may be an emotional battle or another problem behavior that comes in that situation. So knowing this curve can be really helpful, and we'll talk about it again in a couple of slides. DBTC, again, I told you I was going to take the lens of DBTC. More research is coming out about DBTC and showing that if just the parenting curriculum is taught to the environment, it can be helpful at decreasing problem behaviors for children. So if just the environment learns the skills, not the kid, we can be effective in bringing some of these problem behaviors down. So I want to share with you some of the premise of these interventions today and the background from that. In DBTC, the goal, always first and foremost, is keeping the child alive. Nothing else matters if the child is not alive. Next is ensuring safety, because if safety is not in place, we're not too far away from not being alive, and that's a problem too. The next target is the adult-child relationship. I want you all to remember back to your childhood and think about a coach that you had along the way, a teacher that you had along the way, parent, whomever it might be for you, who you did not like. How likely were you to listen to what they had to say and to hear their suggestions? Without the relationship, the kid's not going to want to be involved. Same thing we know in the therapeutic environment. We have to work on the relationship to be able to be effective in the work that we do. Next comes skills development and skills training, and then comes everything else. And when I say skills, I'm not talking about academic skills. I'm talking about emotional regulation skills, identifying your emotions, knowing how to talk about them, knowing what you're feeling, how to tolerate a tough time without making it worse. So when my brother steals my toy, I'm not punching him in the face, or I'm not saying that I'm going to hurt myself or somebody else. And interpersonal effectiveness. How can I ask for what I want? How can I say no when it doesn't feel good to say yes? And how do I get along with the people in my environment? And then comes everything else. School, how clean my room is, am I brushing my teeth twice a day? All of that's later in the priority list. And keeping that hierarchy in mind can be really helpful. In this adult training, the adult has several different roles. One of the roles is accepting the child because without child acceptance, we cannot work on the relationship. Back to that teacher, coach, adult that you had. If every time they showed up and they said, you need to do this better, you're really bad at this, and why the heck haven't you figured out how to do the thing? The child's not going to be willing to hear. So there are strategies to work on acceptance. One of them is validation. I'll teach what that is in later on in another slide. Providing an environment that is safe, shaping the environment and making sure that the environment provides the supports that the kid needs in that space and that there's not a mismatch, and also coaching skills for how to do the things we talked about earlier. Naming emotions, talking about emotions, asking for help, saying no, and not making the problem worse. Prevention of behaviors. If the analogy is being a firefighter, you can't be a really good firefighter to prevent problem behaviors and fires if you're going around setting them. So we're not adding shame to the situation, we're not name calling, and we're not poking the bear. We're also stabilizing the environment so there's less chaos in the environment. That can be in school, it can be in the home, it can be in the community. So there's more predictability. The adults to learn and use the skills, because if you're using them and learning them and you're modeling it in front of the kids are more likely to use them themselves. And then also explicitly teaching the skills at the right times. And then intervention of behavior, again, back to safety, helping the environment, and coaching skills. There are different phases in supporting a kiddo who has big emotions and big behaviors. And I want you to see what these are, and I'm going to put them back on the curve. Adults often have the urge to, can you guys see my cursor? Thumbs up if you can see it. Hey, fabulous. Thank you. Adults have the urge to teach right here, right? You shouldn't be hitting right now. It's really not good for your relationships. Nobody's really going to enjoy being around you, which is shaming if you're doing that behavior. And next time I want you to do that. In this phase, often people are not able to listen. If their emotions are really big, all of their blood in their brain is moving to the emotion centers of the brain, which are towards the back of the brain. The learning and coding memories happens up front in the brain, and they're not able to access that bit. So they literally may be incapable of learning the information that you're sharing in that moment. And we're driving up their emotions if we're teaching here. So after a problem behavior, often if safety is in place, the effective thing to do is to allow time to pass. For me and my eggs, when I drop them on the floor, 1 minute, 30 seconds might have been enough. And yet, for a kiddo, that might be a day because they might still be simmering. When they're calm, we're teaching skills. When your emotions get big, this is something you can do. We're practicing breathing techniques. We're using different body regulation techniques. And when their emotions are starting to get bigger, if we can see it, that's when we remind, hey, I see this is getting tougher, and you told me you had a goal of being in charge of your body and your behaviors. Maybe you can do this thing. When we get up here, we're in safety and we're trying to keep kiddos safe. Any questions about this? Okay. One of the things that I've learned in the last 8-ish years or so is to not underestimate the environment. The environment can really help prevent problem behaviors and problem emotions for a kiddo. There are things that we might take for granted in terms of a person's environment, meaning how noisy it is, how busy the bodies are in the space with somebody else, and parent regulation. Let's start with parents. We know that if parents are having a tough time, they're less regulated. They may be quicker to anger. They may also, be carrying around a lot of stress. There's a lot of things that can go on. And kids with big emotions, They tend to be great sensors. In DBTC, we call them super sensors. They can detect the smallest changes in the environment. Have you ever been around one of your friends and they look at you and they say, something's different about you today? There's something going on with you. I don't know what it is, but there's something off. Super sensors can feel it. It's like they can smell it and feel it in their bones that something is off. And some of you may be wired in this way. I know I tend to lean that way as well, where I can sense those things. And I think it's because we can perceive, when somebody's just a little bit more rigid, or when eye contact seems off, or when the tone of voice feels a little different. And so kids can feel this in their parents. So if parents are using these skills themselves to regulate themselves and managing their own emotions and talking about it, like, hey, sweetie, I had a tough day today. You might see me be a little bit more distant. The super sensor is not going to internalize that and think it's about them, which then sets them off or can add to their tough time. Schools, we can intervene with schools in terms of sharing with teachers. Here's some strategies that might be helpful for this kid. Or when you see this, this might be a sign that they need some space. Or I send an email to my kids' teachers at the start of every school year. They get the wiggles, and one of the best ways for them to handle their wiggles is that they chew gum. Please let my kid chew gum. For them, it makes all the difference in the world. None of the other fidgets work for them, and yet that's the thing that works for them. We can also give schools different skills and different strategies. Last year, I got invited into Wake County schools to teach the psychologists, social workers, and school counselors the DBT STEPS program, which is, or some of the stuff from DBT STEPS, which is how to bring those skills into the school, which I think is really cool because it's an evidence-based program. We can also bring in community agencies. Anywhere the kid exists is a place where we can teach skills to the adults so they can model them and also bring more calm and regulation to the kiddos. And never underestimate the others, which is, neighbors, the Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, YMCA, wherever else the kiddos might be existing, uncles, aunts, grandparents. I know today's adult heavy and focuses on the adults, and I want to keep on going there. The important things for adults to remember is that the relationship is the most important part. Without the relationship, nobody's going to be wanting to listen. So that might mean doing things on purpose to feed the relationship. That looks like sitting down and watching Minecraft, even though you think it's boring. And for the next 10 minutes, it's the most exciting Minecraft ever. Or going to look at fish at Petco again. Talking about trains, whatever the interest is, you are engaging with the child on purpose for feeding the relationship without an expectation that the child behaves well after it or that they reciprocate the interest. It's being mindful of where you are in the curve. Is it a moment of calm? Is it an escalation? Are we already at the top? And is it time to keep our mouths closed and just ensure safety? One of the most important skills that I teach parents and other folks that sometimes they have a tough time with is validation. Validation is the act of saying, I see you. I see what you're going through. It makes sense that you're having this experience, not I like what you did. So if you write down this, I like to call it a formula. If you write this down, I think it may help you if you struggle with validation. If you grew up in a home that did not validate, this may not come easily to you. When I first started using validation, it was forced. It sounded robotic. That's okay. Practice it during times when you are calm. Validation is a technique that helps us improve relationships. It feeds the relationship and it can help de-escalate somebody. So the format is, it makes sense that you thought Karen Gray was not waving back because she did not wave back. And it does not say, but she was on her cell phone and her back was turned to you in the mall, right? Karen Gray is not going to wave back to me. And so it's not saying the thing that comes after the word but. It's just the first bit. Another way you can use that is it makes sense that you felt lonely because you didn't get invited to the birthday party. It makes sense that you punched a hole in the wall because you were angry. And we leave off the part where we say, and you shouldn't punch a hole in the wall because holes in the wall are really expensive. And we've talked about it 10 times. And why are you still punching holes in the wall? Validation is when we build a bridge in the relationship to pull somebody in intentionally or to help them bring their emotions down. It does not mean that we can't go back later on and say, and holes in the wall are expensive, and your goal is not to punch holes in the wall and to work on being the boss of your own feelings. The fourth bullet is kind of blunt, and yet it's true. There's an adult skill of not making it worse. Sometimes we as adults have an urge to say something, do something for our own emotions, and it makes it worse. That can be smart aleck comments, that can be lecturing, it can be insisting that we talk about it now. If a child or somebody else is stomping off to go to their room after they've been escalated, and we say, you need to stay right here, right now, we're not using our skills. That's us having a problem behavior and using force to try to get somebody else to do what we want them to do in that moment because it doesn't feel good to be in that moment. And so we need to use and learn and use our own skills, and that is difficult to do. And we'll miss the mark. And so another skill is learning how to say sorry, right? I am sorry I insisted that you stay in the space with me. That was not the most effective thing, and I'm the grown up, and I really wish I would have just let you go in that moment, and I'm sorry for that. In the future, I'll try to let you go take space. Taking space is a great life skill. The last bullet point is to teach and coach skills use, and you need to know what those skills are to be able to teach them. Spoiler alert, I'll show you in a few pages. I'm writing a book about the fact that many of us grew up in homes without a whole lot of skills, and not because our parents didn't want to have them, but because they weren't taught themselves. So there's no shame in it. Mental health has come a long way. We are talking more about emotions, and we are learning a lot about tangible skills that we can teach people to identify their emotions, talk about their emotions, and how to regulate using thought, using behavior, using their body. And if you don't know them, you can't teach them. And if you don't know them, you also can't use them. And when we teach skills to be concise, be short, if we talk about skills with somebody or we lecture, they zone out. Kids with big emotions tend to escalate quickly. If they're ashamed of what has happened, they're going to shut down and they might have more problem behaviors. When I work with parents, I use 2 minutes as my general rule. If you've talked for more than 2 minutes, you have gone too long. I have them practice saying what they need to say in 2 minutes and it to one another or to a friend. And if they can't do it, I have them practice over and over again until they can shorten it down. And I often will say, set your cell phone timer when you go talk to your kid. Say, I'm going to talk to you for 2 minutes. It's right here. That's all we're going to talk about. Are you okay with that? Okay. Questions and answers. What you got for me?
Okay, and now is a good time. You're definitely welcome to unmute. You don't have to unvideo if you don't want to, but you can unmute and ask, or if you're just not comfortable, you're welcome to type it into the chat, and I will be happy to read it out loud for you. And we'll give you guys just a minute.
I was just going to make a comment, Melanie, that I thought, thank you for your presentation. Really interesting.
Yeah.
And I like how, speaking of concise, I like how you made it very nice and concise and understandable. Very nice.
Thank
Um,
you.
one of the things that I really liked and that really landed for me, this idea of, the relationship before the skills and how sometimes we might think the relationship is in a better place but and then move right to skills, but it's maybe not there, right? Yes. So to be checking that out and or